I see my podcast more of like my university because I broke out of university. I don't think I gained anything there. And I now see my podcast actually as my university of learning about life, learning about Bitcoin, learning about finances.
Even people that gathered 1 million have no clue about money, right? Even people that gathered 10, sometimes I've talked to people that have 50, 70, 80 million, no clue how to manage whatever they gathered.
This is why I believe we have a problem with adoption, because people don't want to say to themselves, oh, I'm doing something wrong. Like, people like to point fingers. And by the way, fun fact, when you point one finger, 3 fingers are pointing back right at yourself. Guys, welcome back to the show today. I'm here with 2 amazing podcasters, not just one. Bram, how are you doing today?
Really good, man. Thanks for the invite. I'm excited to have this Podception episode with you guys.
Yeah, likewise. How about you, Robin?
It's an amazing, I just come back from 2 conferences, and it's so cool to speak with the actual podcast, because I feel like we don't have colleagues, and like the podcasters are our colleagues in a way. And so I think we can learn a lot from each other.
You guys have been both crushing it. Honestly, I've enjoyed every single video you've done. So thank you for pushing up so much content. Hey guys, I've got some exciting news. November 13 and 14, I will be attending the Bitcoin conference in Amsterdam. If you are coming, please stop by, say hello, let's connect in real life. In the description box, you'll find a 10% coupon. Grab it and get your ticket before it's too late. By the way, if you find my content any valuable, it would mean a lot if you could subscribe to the channel and slap the like button to support my journey. Thank you. Bram, this one is for you. Have you ever had an episode or a guest who completely changed your perspective on Bitcoin?
I think I'd go with Tony Yazbek. I think his story about being very wealthy in Lebanon and then losing everything he had from one day to the other, and learning about how in Lebanon there are people that rob banks, right? But not to get other people's money, but to get their own money, I think was very eye-opening, especially because the system of money in Lebanon is nothing different than the system in the US or in the EU or wherever you are in the world, right? Like, fiat money system is a fiat money system. It's just that some currencies are stronger than others, and depending on where you were born, you are either lucky or not. And so, yeah, I thought it was really eye-opening, because I grew up in a rich Western country, and yeah, I never really had a problem with money, right? So the fact that I figured out Bitcoin is probably a luxury, whereas in places like Lebanon, it's a necessity, and stuff like 100% inflation overnight actually happens, which is incomprehensible from my point of view. So yeah, I thought it was really interesting what Tony shared. And I think in general, Tony is a great Bitcoin advocate.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen his speech in Prague, and then I had him on my show as well. And I was blown away by the story. We've seen it in Cyprus, we've seen it in Lebanon. So Robin, how about you?
It's funny that Bram brought Tony up, because Tony is not only the one guest that was the most on my show. So he was one time with 2 other people on, and 3 times alone. So like, he's been the only guest that already have been featured 4 times on my podcast. And he is also my, with his company, the Bitcoin Way, my oldest partner. So we've been also working together for a very long time. For me, there's not really like one guest that like made a huge difference, but there are so many that made a small difference that made me realize things. For example, and we just talked about that before, I made in Bulgaria a small keynote about that I think, and if I have to distill it down to like one sentence, for me it's like, people underestimate the impact that Bitcoin will have, but they overestimate the speed of the adoption. And so what I mean by that is, a lot of people get bored, as Bram said before the recording, and a lot of people say like, oh, like, why don't this guy isn't that faster? Like, why aren't we already at like 200, 300, 400K? And they think like everything has to happen overnight. But then if you ask them like, what's their vision for like Bitcoin in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, they actually are not as bullish as I am. So it's like, they're more bullish on the next like 12 months or like the next 6 months, but not as bullish on the, not enough bullish for like the next 10, 20, 30, 50 years. And I think that's the misconception that a lot of people have of Bitcoin being a foundational invention that completely disrupts the way we think about money. And this thing takes time. There's this great saying, I don't know exactly a perfect translation in English, but it's basically, only bad plants, like the ones that like bad for the garden, only those are growing fast. The good ones take time to actually grow and be stronger.
Yeah, super well said. And when you think about it, inflation is 7%. I mean, they say 2 or 3%. CPI, I call it CPI. It's not, it's 7%. So if you think about it, Bitcoin goes on average 45, 50% a year. Study, right? We discussed it on camera before, and people are impatient. They haven't studied enough. Probably they're just the beginning of their journey, which is fine. Robin, this one is for you. Looking back at your early episodes, how has your understanding of Bitcoin changed since the first one you recorded?
Completely, I have. And this is so funny because when I look back in my early episodes, and I sometimes do that, I'm like almost embarrassed of like all the things that I haven't understood about Bitcoin. Obviously, like 600 guests later, I've learned the one or two things about Bitcoin, but also about life and all of that. So, for example, one thing, I was in Bitcoin already. I did self-custody, but I wasn't really aware of UTXO management. Like I heard it, but like I really didn't grasp it at all. Like it's a small detail. And then Wicked came on my podcast. So basically, I was someone said it on the podcast, and I was like, oh, shit, like I should learn about that. And then I invited Wicked, and we made like a 1-2 hour deep dive into UTXO management, and I was like, oh. So it's been interesting inviting guests to specifically acquire knowledge. And so for me, I see my podcast more of like my university, because I broke out of university. I don't think I gained anything there. And I now see my podcast actually as my university of learning about life, learning about Bitcoin, learning about finances. And so, for example, I saw Bram mentioned last time we talked, Dr. Amos, the podcast he did with him, and that he thought like it was such a great episode and it deserved more reach. And after that, I was like, okay, let's check it out. And then I reached out to him, and today I recorded with him, and it's super interesting what he has to say, like a lot of interesting things that I acquire from that. So in general, for me, that's there's a lot of things that I haven't understood about Bitcoin. For example, I haven't grasped that Bitcoin is a foundational invention, something more akin to the printing press, fire, the wheel, or the TCP/IP protocol, and less like Facebook or Google or like something like that. This wasn't fully there. So people would be surprised how small my knowledge was about Bitcoin when I started the podcast. And that's why I also say to people, because people always say like, oh, you need to have like an immense amount of knowledge, and like you do it go in front of the camera. And I always say to them, it's okay to be on a journey. Like it's okay to be not perfect when you start creating content, and it's okay to learn in public, which can be sometimes hard, because especially Bitcoiners are hard on you, and they are sometimes, if you get something wrong, they can be pushing back a lot. This is actually something healthy. It's an immune system of the Bitcoin system. So it's too much to like even answer of like going in all those details what I haven't understood, but like there's a lot of technical things that I haven't understood. My self-custody setup wasn't as good as it is now. It has improved a lot, and my understanding and my long-term outlook of like what the impact of Bitcoin really will be long-term has greatly changed over the course of almost 600 guests.
I couldn't agree more, because people tend to look at successful podcasters or YouTubers or content creators and they judge them by the last video they've done. But if you go back into the largest channels and you watch their first video, well, then it's a different story. Like you said, it's a journey.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what Robin said with regard to learning for yourself. When I started with the podcast, I had like all these ideas and kind of like lost myself in the trap of thinking of more ideas and being perfectionist, etc. And then I saw this video with Mr. Beast, who said like, who was asked like, what is the biggest tip you have? And he said, just make 100 episodes, just do that. And then you figure out if you like what you're doing, if people enjoy what you're creating, and how, stuff works with YouTube and your setup and stuff like that. And that was really freeing hearing that, because then I basically dropped I just parked all the ideas that I had, and it's just like, okay, I'm going to make 100 episodes. So that was just basically my very straightforward goal. And I think a secondary goal was, okay, if I learn even one thing from each conversation, I'll be happy. I mean, I'm not doing it daily like Robin, but I have multiple conversations every week, right? And so I always approach this as it's like a private university, like Robin says. I mean, I have an episode with Stephen Perrineau about the power law for like 90 minutes, and he's like an astrophysicist. And when I talked to him, I just felt like, okay, this is a private lecture basically that we eventually get to share with I don't know, 50,000 people now or something, you know, the views wise. But I'm already happy when I know that I've learned something or I saw something new. And that's also why it's nice. We just talked about going on other podcasts, right? Like when you then go on another podcast as a guest, there's a really nice opportunity to kind of like structure all the thoughts that you got from all the people that you talk to. So I feel like it's a supercharged life hack to just learn a lot and build your conviction. And like Robin said, there's so many different dimensions to Bitcoin, the problem it solves, why it exists, how it works technically, you know, all the philosophical ideas about the impact on the world, all the monetary history stuff, everything that came before us, right? So it's like a never-ending rabbit hole in a very positive way, and that is, I think, something that I'm also really seeing, and I think the biggest thing I've learned, talked about it today with someone on the phone actually, I think it's from James Lavish, just in general, like the understanding nominal versus real returns on your investments. So for example, within the context of what James Lavish talks about, he obviously talks a lot about you know, sovereign bonds, treasuries, stuff like that, right? And just realizing that when you buy a bond for like 10 years and you know, you have a certain nominal promise of the amount of money units you're getting back over that time period, you shouldn't be happy with these units that you get back in 10 years if they've lost like 80% of their value. But in some strange way, yeah, sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, big countries, you know, are all in this sort of, yeah, for lack of a better way, well, yeah, it's a sort of Ponzi circle jerk. I don't even know how to describe it, but I found that so fascinating. That's something that I instantly got is something that people that should get it, whose job it is to maintain purchasing power or grow a certain amount of capital, are not seeing that. Sometimes I get to a certain point where I'm like, okay, I think it works like this. That makes no sense. Bitcoin makes sense, right? But it's quite big. But then I see like the entirety of the financial world do this thing that I find stupid, and then I start doubting myself. Like, oh, okay, did I figure this out, or like, are they dumb? Am I dumb? Or you know what I mean? Like, so it's really hard in this journey of learning about Bitcoin to really accept the maliciousness, stupidity of like the fiat money system. There's so many weird things that you come across where people are just, you know, chugging along, doing something that is unproductive in real returns in this context, right? And I think James Lavish really showed me that, yeah, if you hold a bond for 10 years, but the purchasing power goes down 60% or 80%, then yeah, what are you doing? You know, and I think if countries have that problem and pension funds have that problem, it's very easy to take the little step to yourself and realize you also have that problem, probably even worse, right? And so I'd say that was one of my biggest insights. But yeah, I wonder what you guys think about that, doubting your own conviction or having your ego be like, well, yeah, sure, dude, you figured it you figured it out, right? Like having real conviction in Bitcoin is hard, especially when you talk to a lot of people or when you follow all this stuff, right? I think almost every day you have to ask yourself the question, can I still trust my own diligence and how I reflected on this and got to this conviction? So
this is why I believe we have a problem with adoption, because people don't want to say to themselves, oh, I'm doing something wrong. Like people like to point fingers. And by the way, fun fact, when you point one finger, 3 fingers are pointing back right at yourself. So whenever you have to digest the fact that you've done something wrong or you made a mistake, it requires, you know, cojones, they say in Spain, big balls to say, hey, I was doing something wrong. I'm going to go back and change how we're sitting. So I think this is one of the bigger major blockers. And interesting enough for me, the whole podcast has been a self-fulfilling journey where I understood who I was as a person, how I speak, how I communicate. You know, I said, oh, maybe I need to stop saying this much so that I can stop chopping it off. I move my hands too much. You know, this is my Italian genes coming out. So for me, it was a very introspective journey into understanding how I communicate, and also that kind of, I don't know, 20 minutes you have with the guest where you're not recording, you are chilling, you are getting to know each other, you're breaking the ice.
I mean, this is really interesting, but I like the point that brought up of like people that should understand that they're actually losing value over time if they don't measure it in the right way, nominal versus the real value. I think there's a huge incentive for them to do it, because those are financial advisors, those are people in TradFi, they usually have clients, and so they're incentivized to take the US dollar value and show the clients to like see what growth we achieved in US dollars. And I showed multiple times already the real estate crash that's going on in Bitcoin terms. But then people say like, oh yeah, Bitcoin is growing so fast, like that's unfair. And I'm like, okay, like that's fair point, valid point. Let's just use gold. Measured in gold, real estate has gone down the last 10, 20, 30, and 40 years. There's been only small amounts of time in history where real estate goes up in gold terms. And it's just like short term always. So if you measure something in something tangible and something real, it's way harder to make money. And so when I go ahead and say like, okay, I save all my money in Bitcoin, and so I denominate also everything I do in Bitcoin, it is sometimes frustrating because like you have to fight to keep the same amount of Bitcoin income a lot harder this year than last year. And next year will be even harder than that. And so for financial advisors, for the TradFi people, it's easier to say, hey, let's denominate everything in US dollar and then see here, I made you 3% per year, I made you 5% per year, I made you 10% per year. And in reality, they have lost money. They hired someone to take care of their money, but they actually lost money, and they also paid them fees for losing their own money. And so this is kind of a really bad thing. So they are not incentivized to get it, and they might get it and lie about it, or they might just not look even there because they're incentivized to look the other way.
Pay me 2% because it's hard. I will figure it out for you. Totally agree. This has been fascinating to me, but also maybe another thing I've learned is to also think about, okay, what is the other side? What is the signal in what someone is saying to me, right? Like what does that tell us? And I think with the example that Robin just gave, most of the signals I've seen tell me we are extremely early, extremely early, right? Because the use case that Robin just talked about, right? This is for people that have money, right? That can hire someone to do investing for them, right? So let's say that is from 500K, probably $1 million or something, right? Even people that gathered $1 million have no clue about money, right? Even people that gather 10, sometimes I've talked to people that have 50, 70, 80 million, no clue how to manage whatever they gathered in whatever way, right? That doesn't really matter. And it's not about intelligence, right? Because these are obviously smart people, but they just never ask the question, what is money? By the way, that's why Breedlove's podcast is so brilliant, right? Because what is money is the defining question that starts this entire journey, right? So the signal I get from this is why we are so early is because no one is asking that question, not in the Western world at least, right? You know, like the example with Tony in Lebanon, you get woken up very quickly. But like in a Western world where everything just works, air quotes, yeah, the people don't really ask themselves, what is money? What should it represent? What is the impact of the fact that it's being diluted and debased the whole time? Like all these things people don't think about because, I don't know, if you like a guy I talked to who sold his company and has like 60 million, he never really thought about that. He was making like building his company and he got lucky. Someone gave him all that money. And now he's like, oh, I don't want less of that at least. So I need someone who knows what they're talking about to help me protect what I gathered, right? And there are multiple underlying layers that I think a lot of people aren't even looking at. And when I was talking to this guy, I asked him, so, okay, like everyone knows he sold the company and that he has money. So I could talk about it with him. I said like, okay, how are you protecting this now, right? Like, what are you doing? And then he said, yeah, I'm a lot in, so he has like a fund for startups and that is high risk. He likes startups and stuff. So he just sees that as high risk basically, right? And the rest, he said, yeah, I do a lot in real estate. And then I asked him like, okay, but why are you into real estate? Like, why? Can you tell me why? And he was like silent for a few minutes and he said, yeah, I don't really know. And I said, okay, that's a very interesting answer. honest answer. So thank you. But maybe another question, like, are you managing all the real estate stuff yourself, or do you have a guy who's doing that? And he's like, yeah, I have a guy who's doing it. I said, okay, that's interesting. So you were like fully in control when building your company, you know, strategies, decisions, all these things. You decided to sell, you got that money, and now you are outsourcing the protection of this thing, of this capital, to another person that you did due diligence on. In what way? Like, do you understand what the abstraction here is, and how you're outsourcing the responsibility? And he was looking at me like with these eyes like, this guy has a point. And it was nice, and that was like a nice leeway eventually also into Bitcoin and talking about the differences and stuff. But I just want to share that example, that even someone that is at that level is just doing what other people are doing. And when they're and when you're intellectually honest and you're confronted with the fact that you don't really know why you're doing what you're doing, that is when the light bulb goes off, right? Because that's when I realize, oh yeah, I was totally in control, and now I'm outsourcing this. I want to know why. You know, is that worth it, basically, right? And then they start looking at it like that. But yeah, I've had many of these conversations where I was also just surprised with these people being surprised about the fact that they never really even thought about it.
By the way, that's level 2, because level 1 is not even being aware of the fact that your money are losing value. Then you have level 2, which is someone who's, oh, I'm going to hire someone, which is, like Robin said, a financial advisor. They already, quote, evolved compared to some people. They don't even see the problem. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the hot and crazy. I think Bitcoin now is in the perfect spot, because it's not too hot, but it's not too crazy. Like in 2011, 2013, it was crazy. Like there was nothing, no information. It was much harder to gather knowledge. And at some point, it's going to be extremely hot. So now I think we are right in the middle, which is crazy enough, but sexy enough. How do you see Bitcoin fitting into the current financial system? Is it a disruptor? Is it a complementary asset, or something else completely?
Oh, that's a great question. I usually describe Bitcoin as a mirror, basically, as a mirror to the fiat money system, basically from, you know, the characteristics of Bitcoin being absolutely scarce versus infinite fiat money, right? And then from there on, kind of like the incentives that creates. So if you know that all your money today is worth the most today, you are incentivized to be a consumer instead of a builder. With Bitcoin, if you know that this absolute scarcity combined with growing demand, because it is the best form of money, the best asset, it will gain value over time. That actually gives you time and space to become a builder. So there's like several things as to why I kind of like make it a mirror, and they're also separate, right? Like they're not really connected, so they're kind of like happening in parallel. And it's a fun question. I think eventually, when, you know, to tie it back to what we talked about with the real rate of return, or what is true capital, what is pristine collateral, stuff like that, I think Bitcoin is just clearly superior to any other assets or any other type of collateral that is being used in the fiat money system. Those types of assets or collateral are also being used in the fiat money system because the fiat money itself is losing value all the time, right? And so that is how other assets that shouldn't really be capitalized are actually capitalized or monetized, right? For example, in the context of real estate, it's just very fragile, right? Like people say, you probably know this, right? But people say like, oh, deflation is bad, we should never have deflation, right? When I, for example, talk about what Jeff Booth talks about with technological progression creates deflation, which is good, more accessibility of technology, blah blah blah, all these things, you know, road to abundance. And then people say like, no, deflation is bad, but they never really finish the sentence, right? Like the full sentence is deflation is bad in a debt-based financial system. I think, by the way, this is my other big learning. When this is the case, you can never really truly progress with the natural speed of progression. Basically, we're always held back to some degree on this progression. Next to that is also, we are also always held back on the destruction part. Like no one really wants to let go, if that makes sense, right? Like in my mind, true capitalism was, we all three have a bakery or a cookie store, yeah, because we like making cookies, but Mauricio's cookies are the best, and Robin's suck, and mine suck too. And that is great, right? Then more people go to Mauricio because he has the best cookies, and we are confronted with the fact that we are bad cookie bakers. which is great. Like that's the whole point, right? The whole point is that you figure out what you're not good at in order to try out a lot of stuff to figure out, okay, what you are actually good at, and how you can add value to the world or a society. But in a debt-based fiat money system, we all got credit to open our little store, right? And then, it's all tied into basically the underpinning of it cannot really fail. It's not allowed to fail, and that creates these bad incentives. I once saw Biden went to like all these SME companies, and he actually went to a restaurant and he asked like, "Oh, how's it going?" And then the woman was like, "Yeah, it's amazing. I got like $80,000 in grants this year, or or subsidy, something this year." And when I saw that, I was like, "Yeah, this is the point. Your business should have died." And it sucks for you, but you are maybe bad at running a restaurant. But that is a great learning, right? Like that is actual, mental progression and progression in your personal life to try something and figure out that you're not good at it, and then also save yourself from just doing something you hate or are not good at, and that other people don't even value. Like what are you doing, right? And I think that is such an interesting dichotomy or opposition, where in Bitcoin, if you know that how the asset you use to store your value gains value over time, and you have time and space to try something out, I can try this cookie store and then I figure out I suck, but then I didn't get poorer, right? So I actually had the opportunity to fail, which is great. And then I can try something again, right? And also, I mean, we all have been doing this for quite some time now. It takes time to build something, to figure something out, right? Like I'm doing this for 2 years and I feel like I'm just getting started in figuring it out. And so if you want to build something that lasts or has value, you need time and space to learn and to fail, and also have the financial space to actually fail, if that makes sense. And I think like in a fiat money system, people are incentivized to stay in a rat race, do they don't like, just go to a job where they're like paying half attention, delivering half the value, but it's fine. Or people work at the government, do a half-ass job, but it's still fine, they don't really get fired. So there is not really an incentive to develop yourself or do something big or do something crazy, chase a crazy idea, or something like that. So eventually, to go back to your question, I think they exist together. You can move to the Bitcoin system from the fiat money system, which is what I did, I think, in my mind and in practice. And you can just be there. Like that is how you move. I do think that the fiat money system eventually needs Bitcoin, because there needs to be some real underpinning for the supposed value that is in certain places. And I think the people that figure that out will probably survive the inevitable ending of fiat money in a better way than the people that don't, right? And maybe that's the third learning. The inevitable ending of fiat money is not an opinion, right? That's a mathematical fact. So it can take another 70 years, like our entire lives, but it's going to happen. And it's also accelerating, right? So more and more people will see how perverse this is, how inflation is not stopping, and all these things. And so eventually I do think the fiat money system needs Bitcoin, but basically as a lifeboat to get out of it or to survive it.
Yeah, I agree. And when companies are fighting, the consumer always wins, right? And the free market punishes. To continue on the example, I completely agree. If then I become the only guy who makes cookies and I control the market, then other bakeries are going to pop in, kind of trying to copy the recipe, maybe even make it even more tasty.
Yeah,
for
or
cheaper.
You're complacent and then a new opportunity. But this is in the same for money. But money gives power to governments and states, right? And so that's why I also call this the biggest monetary battle, the biggest technological battle that we could ever have, is this clinging on to power, clinging on to owning the money and determining the value of the money is like a fundamental part of the power of a government. So they're not going to let that go. Like this is a fight, right? Some people say it's a war, but it's a fight. But I also like that Bitcoin is separate in this mirror, because the harder they fight, the harder they put up with restrictions or want to do like CBDC and like that, programmable money, CO2 budgets and stuff like that. Let them do it, because there's this other thing that just shows that it's better. So that is fine, but I do think that is going to happen. That will illustrate that battle kind of further.
Robin, what do you think?
My answer to that changed a lot in the last like 2-3 years. And I think for most people that encounter Bitcoin, it changes over time as you get exposed to more information. So in the beginning, when you first look at Bitcoin, you might look at it of the lens of TradFi, and you look at like, oh, it's an unique diversifier, kind of the BlackRock speak of like, oh, it's interesting. I can mix it into my portfolio of assets. And then you go further down the rabbit hole of saying like, oh, maybe it is like even a savings technology. Maybe it's not an investment. It's not a diversifier. Maybe it's savings. And then to get to the conclusion, okay, most of my money like should be in savings and some of my money should be in investings. So with some of my money, I should build companies. With some of my money, I might should bet on like a startup or like have some money in there, and Bitcoin is savings. But then you go further down the rabbit hole and you say, okay, but I can also receive money and send money. And I've gone down the rabbit hole where I now receive money in Bitcoin. So I receive Bitcoin and I send Bitcoin on a weekly basis now. Not quite yet daily, but definitely weekly basis. And so then you get to the conclusion, oh, Bitcoin might just be money. Bitcoin is the new money. Like we can send it, receive it, like unit of account, all of that. But then I thought like, okay, like I'm still not there yet. Like, what is Bitcoin actually doing? And then I went back to saying like, what is Bitcoin? Foundational invention always comes to my mind, where what did fire bring us? What did the wheel bring us? What did like writing down thoughts bring us? Like to save your mind on a piece of paper, to save your mind on like a piece of stone. What did the internet bring us? Like the computing and AI. Like this is all like protocol foundational layer inventions that really changed how we look at the world and how we look at that specific industry. And so with Bitcoin, I think the most interesting, at least for me, Bitcoin products is that we have trust without intermediaries. So I can have a bank account and I don't have to trust anyone else that the money will still be there in 10 years. Actually nominally there, but also in real value there. So like in both cases, my money will still be there in 10 years. I don't have to trust, if I send now to Pam, a thumbnail designer, I send it to El Salvador in Bitcoin and I send her like $1,000. I send it to her and I don't have to trust that she gets it because I know what address she has and I can prove and verify that in this address that she gave to me, the money is now there. And so this is the most foundational thing that I think Bitcoin did, is removing the trust from financialization and from like all the TradFi things that we're used to. And so now what is that? Like, yeah, that's 100% an innovation. It's like an disruptor. It's like no word of describing that is too big, like a paradigm shift. Like you can put many different words on that. But for me, the most important thing is just like, I can live now in that world. I don't have to wait. We always have this thing of like, I wish we could already have a Bitcoin standard. I wish we would already be ending central banks. I wish we could do this and that. I'm like, it's already here. Like you can already denominate your money in Bitcoin. There are third-party solutions where you can spend all your Bitcoin. You don't have to touch any bank accounts. It's still inconvenient. Like I get that. Like it's not like completely convenient to live without a bank account. I also don't do it, but it's possible at this point. And so we have this broken system, and finally we have an exit valve, a savings, a life raft, if you so will, that we can just put ourselves on there and we are fine. And I think there's a lot of value to fighting for this exit valve to be bigger, to fighting for this life raft to be as good as possible. And this is what we're basically doing, because we are going on this life raft. We're seeing the Titanic and we're seeing like they're eating steaks up there. They are completely delusional. They think it will not sink. I mean, also with the actual Titanic, people were in denial that it will sink while it was already in the process of sinking. I really think we have to, once we are on this life raft, we have to advocate for it, and we have to make sure this life raft stays intact, because this is the chance we get. This is the chance we have for our generation, or like, I mean, we have different generations, but for Gen Z, for millennials, and all the generations above that, this is our chance of a trustless money that nobody can ever F with.
I subscribe to the Gandhi idea, be the change you want to see in the world, right? So take control, take ownership. That's the real proof of work, right? So you can indeed stop complaining and start doing something from today, because like you said, it's no more excuse. Back in the days when the car was first invented, there was a person with a flag, which was literally walking in front of the car saying, attention, there is a car, attention, there is a car. So it was totally useless, right? Because it was going as fast as a human with a flag. So people say, this is never going to work. When it comes to Bitcoin adoption, how fast and or slow are we going? Is it too fast, too slow, or just the right pace? What do you think?
Great question. I think it's going slow in a sense that, you know, the problems we kind of touched upon, I think, you know, with monetary debasement, it's all accelerating. I call Bitcoin an asymmetric opportunity based on publicly available information. Like all the information is there, you can learn about it. Us three aren't really that special. You know, we aren't special that we figured it out. Like there's just all this information that you can digest yourself. So I'm kind of amazed by, like I just mentioned, by the fact that some people that should know about this problem, especially when they're rich, they don't know about this problem, and the people lower on a social economic ladder even know less about the problem, logically, also because they don't have time to think about the problem they have, right? So because a lot of people are just surviving or protesting and pointing fingers, right? So it's going slow, but I do think it's going steady. This is a one-by-one conversion. It's a mental conversion, which I think takes longer than when someone pitches you a great stock, right? Or a cool new app or a cool new platform that, you know, the barrier to entry is like low for, you know, joining the new Facebook or trying out Threads, or I think is not what we should compare Bitcoin with. So I do think it's going slow but steady. With steady, I think there's certain things. I don't know about Robin actually, but I know Maurizio and I definitely dabbled in crypto before. I think crypto totally killed itself with Pump.fun. You know, there's an abundance of crypto coins now, right? There's an infinite amount of crypto coins, and it's only going to be worse. So slowly nature is healing. Sometimes you see these tweets on X where someone is like, where are the quality projects in crypto? Yeah, dumbass, there's only one. So I don't think it's bad people are distracted. I don't think it's bad people are slow. Again, this is the changing of money. And if you never thought about what money is, how would you even figure out Bitcoin, right? I mean, pitching Bitcoin, saying like, oh, this is a better money, or this is better collateral, or this is a better asset, only appeals to a very, very, very small subset of people. And then if we say, okay, then let's talk about the problem. You don't understand what money is. That's also a very, very bad pitch, right? You're doing it wrong, very bad pitch, right? So in order for people to understand that, why they're maybe struggling when they're getting groceries, right? Or why they think all the greedy billionaires should all give away half of their wealth, or a lot of these things that people nowadays think should be fixed in the world. Before you actually get to the point where you understand that the quality of the money creates the quality of the incentives for people to do whatever they are doing within their role of whatever organization or government, it is kind of futile to talk about Bitcoin with them, right? And so I think you need to take some sort of a red pill before you can take an orange pill, right? Like not only for when you look at yourself, like we just talked about, just realizing, okay, I was an idiot. I was unconsciously unaware of what I was doing. I don't understand money. There's other people that do. There's other people that control the money. These people are taking advantage of my ignorance and not understanding of money. That's a real thing, right? Like you are not an actor in this in the fiat money financial system. You're a subject. Okay, that sucks. What do I do now? Oh, now I have to realize that there are like other people that basically control me. That's pretty, you know. So there's this arch before you get to Bitcoin, and I think, especially for the people that are already into Bitcoin, and we kind of touched upon that before, they think, you know, I'm just a general pleb. I figured it out. Why don't all these other people figure it out? Why isn't it going that fast? Where, you know, and that is the danger when you are already into Bitcoin, I would say, that you get distracted, that you think it's boring, that you think it's slow and whatnot. But the beautiful thing is, I think, that this is not only a financial escape, but it's a mental escape, right? More Bitcoin is nicer, obviously, but I don't really think it matters how much Bitcoin you have, as long as you've understood that you are thinking for yourself. You try to be diligent and got all this information and then reflected upon it and then realized you were an idiot for not paying attention, for being ignorant, just like I did. And then you make the decision to pick something else, to actually empower yourself by adopting this better money. And that, I think, is more freeing than the actual amount of Bitcoin you have, because that will help you to realize that you can actually think for yourself and that you can get rewarded for thinking for yourself, that it's uncomfortable but super positive to think for yourself, right? And that is, I think, the biggest lesson you can learn from adopting Bitcoin. And then from there on, you need to realize that this is a hard process and that not everyone will awaken at the same time. And that is your HODL challenge, not to get bored, not to get distracted, keep trusting yourself, keep learning, keep reflecting, and then basically just enjoy life is what I would say. And also figure out how you can contribute in your own way, like we are doing what we are doing, or at least attempting, however you think you can contribute to telling other people about Bitcoin itself, whatever. Figure it out and start doing that.
Coins are temporary, but Bitcoin is inevitable. Robin, how do you feel?
Just to quickly answer that question, like I also unfortunately dabbled into crypto. I had Ethereum and like one small coin, like some gaming weird thing, but I think it needed like 6 or 7 months to get rid of that thing, like to realize. I started with Bitcoin, then I dabbled in other things, and then like came back. But I think we all have our crypto stories. It's interesting because Bitcoin continues to humble each and every one of us, even though we already get it. And so in the moments where we think, oh, it cannot go lower, it will go lower. In the moments where we think like, oh, now we can take a little bit Bitcoin off because it can't go higher, it absolutely will surely go higher in that moment. And so I realized that I have no control over the speed of the adoption. I can only contribute what I can contribute. It's a little bit like, oh yeah, I don't like the weather today. Like, yeah, I can complain, I can scream, but I cannot really do anything about the weather. I just know the sun will come up tomorrow, and maybe it's behind clouds. I don't know, but it will be there. In the same way I see the Bitcoin adoption, I just know it will be adopted as long as it is decentralized and secure, as long as we fight for it. And I don't see any slowing down of that. I see an acceleration of that, especially in Gen Z. I see a lot of like more younger people now getting interested in Bitcoin and getting away from the crypto degen meme coin space, which is very positive. And so there is this aspect of we cannot control, like don't try to control something that you cannot control anyways. You can contribute the best way possible to this Bitcoin evolution, but there is this great awakening that you at some point have, that you realize you don't matter that much to Bitcoin as you might think you do. And so in that sense, we all contribute, we all like speak, we all have maybe, we do maybe like a local Bitcoin meetup. We put our financial energy into Bitcoin. We all like do like meme posting on Twitter, and we are playing our small part. And as a group, as a collective, we actually make a difference. We see that all the time. When Christine Lagarde now speaks about Bitcoin, she already says, I will be attacked. I don't know if you've seen the one at the Dutch central bank. She already knows that when she is talking bad things about Bitcoin, that she will be attacked, and she should be, because she's wrong. And so as a collective, we're extremely strong, but we shouldn't be in this ego trip and saying like, I'm so important in Bitcoin, like I matter that much, like I'm on the stage, or like I have this podcast or anything like that. We don't matter that much. If like the reality is, each and every one of us, if we just decide side. Nobody has a buzz factor in Bitcoin. And I don't know if you're aware of the buzz factor. It's basically maybe in a small company or like a small startup. If the founder is hit by a buzz, it's usually the end of the startup, especially if it's a small or like an early one. And so nobody in Bitcoin at this point has a buzz factor. Like if Michael Saylor or Saifedean Ammous, like take in your view, the most important person in Bitcoin currently and put him in front of a bus, drive the bus over it, and Bitcoin will run tomorrow regardless. We've kind of come to this point where we are so decentralized and secure that it's stronger than any one of us, but we still have to keep fighting for it, to keep it decentralized and secure, because I don't think it's over. I don't think the fight is over. And I think we have to keep doing what we are doing. And so it's this weird mix between realizing, being humble enough that you yourself, or like I myself, don't matter that much in Bitcoin. But if we're working together and if we're doing great things together and doing things in the right way together, we actually make a huge difference in the world with Bitcoin. And so to come back to the question that you asked initially, like, are we going too fast? Are we going too slow? Are we going, what is the speed of Bitcoin? And I think we are always at every single time going at the very speed that we are supposed to be going. This might be like a weird answer, but I truly think that the Bitcoin evolution is happening for a reason, and it's happening in the speed of which it happens for a reason. I don't mind the $50,000 price at the end of the 2025 years. I don't think it will happen. Like I have a hard time believing that, but I would love that, especially because I'm young and I want to scoop up more Bitcoin. And so if you are concerned about the speed of the adoption and you think it's too slow or you think it's too fast or like whatever direction you think, it's usually with people that are in general like not happy with life. Like it's like if you're super happy with your life and like how it's going, and also, I mean, there's a whole nother topic now that I'm opening, but it's like I've seen people that say like, Bitcoin, okay, it's great. It might 10x, it might like 50x, but that doesn't change my position. And I always say like, you don't have a savings problem, you have an income problem. You have to work on yourself better. You have to like reinvest in your skills, in your proof of work. Because if you have an asset that appreciates in a CAGR of 40, 50, 60%, and it's not enough for you, you have to work on a better income. And you have to work on acquiring more skills. And that might be not as kind of a message, but I think it's very important to notice that casino and meme coins is not the solution if 50% CAGR in Bitcoin is not enough for you.
I love both your answers, by the way. There is one of my favorite quotes. I used to be a quote geek. I used to share a quote every day for a long time when I was in China. So I'm deep into quotes. So I apologize for my quote geekness. But one of my favorite quotes says, if you're planning a picnic and then it rains and you're upset, is it really the rain or is your perception towards rain who upset you? So like you said, it's all about how you perceive life. It's not about life itself. It's about the lens you put between life and your perception. So I completely agree and subscribe to the idea of everything happens for a reason and how you react is all it matters. I completely agree. But guys, thank you so much for being here. I cannot wait to see you both in Amsterdam. For those of you guys watching, you have to push pause. And if you don't, go and follow Bram and Robin, because these two are my two absolute favorite podcasters. So thank you guys for being here. It means a lot to me.
Bye-bye.
Ciao. Thank you.
Bye.